In 1945, on the peaks of the Bavarian Alps, the children of the Nazi elite sat in a darkened room watching Mickey Mouse cartoons. Outside the windows of the Berghof, the Third Reich was collapsing. Inside, the 6 children of Albert Speer, Adolf Hitler's favorite architect, believed they were living in a fairy tale. They did not know that the man who brought them American cartoons was also the man keeping the machinery of the Holocaust running. This was the last moment of innocence before the silence began. When the war ended, the fairy tale dissolved into looting and interrogation. The Speer family home was stripped bare by soldiers. The father, once the master of European war production, was transported to Nuremberg to face the International Military Tribunal. The prosecutors demanded death. They presented evidence of millions of slave laborers worked to the bone under Speer's command. But Albert Speer did something the other defendants like Hermann Göring did not. He performed remorse. He crafted the persona of the good Nazi, the technocrat who had been blinded by duty, unaware of the chimneys and the gas chambers. The judges spared his life. He received 20 years at Spandau prison in Berlin. For his wife, Margaret, and their 6 children, this sentence was a slow form of execution. They were exiled to Heidelberg, a family branded with the most notorious name in history, in a country desperate to forget. Survival required a new kind of moral compromise. While Albert Speer counted days in a prison cell, his former associate, Rudolf Walters, quietly organized a secret financial channel known as the School Fund. Wealthy industrialists, men who had profited from slave labor during the war, contributed discreetly. Over the years, 158,000 Deutsche Marks flowed into the Speer household. The children were fed, clothed, and educated on the proceeds of the very crimes their father was imprisoned for. It was guilt money, laundered into tuition fees. The stain of the name was indelible. The youngest son had been born in 1940, at the zenith of German power. His parents had christened him Adolf. By 1945, that name was a curse. In a bureaucratic act of erasure, the family officially changed his name to Arnold. A signature on a piece of paper could alter a birth certificate, but it could not alter memory. The boy grew up knowing who he was named after, and what that implied about the people who raised him. For the eldest daughter, Hilda, the legacy was a closed door. As a teenager, she applied for a visa to visit the United States. It was denied. The reason was explicit. She was the daughter of a convicted war criminal. She was learning the brutal lesson of the post-war era. To the world, they were not individuals. They were biological extensions of their father's guilt. For 20 years, Albert Speer existed only as a ghost. He was handwriting on paper, smuggled out of Spandau by a sympathetic orderly. In these letters, he constructed an image of a wise, caring patriarch, guiding his children from afar. The children grew up clinging to this paper father, waiting for the day he would return to complete their family. That day arrived on October 1st, 1966. The heavy gates of Spandau opened. Albert Speer stepped out, not into the arms of his family, but into the waiting lens of the world media. A limousine idled nearby. Publishers and journalists surrounded him. The reunion the children had fantasized about for 2 decades evaporated in an instant. Speer did not go home to be a father. He went into the world to be a celebrity. He spent his freedom cementing the myth he had started at Nuremberg. He wrote memoirs that sold millions of copies. He gave interviews portraying himself as a gentleman caught in a tragedy. His children watched from the sidelines as he chose fame over reconciliation. Hilda later noted that one by one, the siblings gave up. The man who walked out of prison was a stranger who loved his own reflection more than his flesh and blood. Faced with this betrayal, the Speer children had to carve their own paths through the wreckage. They could not change their past, but they could choose how to inhabit the future. Albert Speer Jr. chose the most complex path. He became an architect. He entered the very profession that had seduced his father into the arms of the devil. He became one of Germany's most successful urban planners, designing for the Beijing Olympics and Expo 2000. He achieved the architectural immortality his father had craved, but he did it by strictly separating his work from his name. He built a career on the condition of silence, succeeding where his father failed, yet forever walking in the same shadow. Hilda chose confrontation. She entered politics, joining the Green Party, aligning herself with the environmentalists and the left-wing activists who despised everything the Third Reich stood for. She dedicated her life to fighting anti-Semitism. In 1994, she received the Moses Mendelssohn Award from a Jewish organization. It was a profound inversion. The daughter of the man who enslaved Europe was honored for healing the wounds he helped inflict. But perhaps the most quiet and devastating act of atonement came from the daughter, Margaret. She had inherited a collection of valuable paintings from her father. These were works acquired during the years of plunder. The provenance was murky. The moral weight was heavy. Margaret did not hang them on her walls. She did not sell them for personal profit. She liquidated the collection and donated the entire proceeds to a foundation supporting Jewish women artists. She took the wealth of the perpetrator and returned it to the victims. It was a transaction of pure restorative justice. Albert Speer died in London in 1981, wealthy and celebrated, still insisting he had not known the full extent of the horror. He died believing his own lie. But his children knew better. They had lived in the vacuum he left behind. They had seen the letters, the hypocrisy, and the coldness. The story of the Speer family is not a story of redemption. It is a story of the debris that remains after the catastrophe. The father built a myth to save himself. The children built lives to save their souls. In the end, the only thing they shared was a name, and the silence that lay between them.